Hurricane Nate lashes Mississippi, Alabama Gulf Coast. Live updates New Orleans. Hurricane Nate made landfall as a Category 1 storm, first striking the mouth of Mississippi River late Saturday and then making second landfall near Biloxi early Sunday. The storm had maximum sustained winds of 85 miles per hour as the eye of the storm moved over Keesler Air Force Base in Mississippi. Gulf Coast residents scrambled earlier to finalize storm preparations as Hurricane Nate raced swiftly over the central Gulf of Mexico on Saturday, gaining added strength as forecasters said it would smash into the U.S. coast during the night. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards said the storm's eye is expected to make landfall in the area near the mouth of the Mississippi River around 7 p.m., likely as a Category 2 hurricane. He urged residents to make final preparations quickly and stressed that Nate will bring the possibility of storm surge reaching up to 11 feet in some coastal areas and strong winds. It's going to hit and move through our area at a relatively fast rate, limiting the amount of time it's going to drop rain, Edwards said. But this is a very dangerous. Forecasters said Nate could dump 3 to 6 inches of rain on the region, with isolated totals of up to 10 inches. Follow along with the latest updates below. All times are Eastern unless otherwise noted. 1:55 a.m. Nate makes second landfall near Biloxi. Hurricane Nate made second landfall near Biloxi, Mississippi as a Category 1 storm, the National Hurricane Center said. The storm has maximum sustained winds of 85 miles per hour. A hurricane warning is in effect from the mouth of the Pearl River to the Alabama/Florida border. A turn toward the north-northeast and northeast with an increase in forward speed is expected during the next couple of days, the National Hurricane Center said. On the forecast track, Nate's center will continue to move inland over Mississippi and across the Deep South, Tennessee Valley, and central Appalachian Mountains through Monday. 1:44 a.m. More than 17,000 without power in Mississippi as of 1 a.m. It's Sunday. Roughly 17,000 customers from multiple utility companies are without power, CBS affiliate WLOX reports. 1:15 a.m. Social media images show storm surge washing ashore. Photos and videos from social media early Sunday showed the storm surge washing ashore along the Gulf Coast in Mississippi and Alabama. The National Weather Center has warned that life-threatening storm surge from the mouth of the Mississippi River to the Okaloosa/Walton County line in Florida. 12:30 a.m. Nearly 3,500 power outages reported in Mississippi. Nearly 3,500 people from multiple utility companies were without power as of 11 p.m., reported CBS Biloxi affiliate WLOX. The storm is expected to make second landfall near Biloxi. As of 11 p.m., the National Hurricane Center said Nate was about 35 miles 56 kilometers south of Biloxi. After that, the center of the storm will move across the Deep South, Tennessee Valley and central Appalachian Mountains through Monday. 11:54 p.m. Nate's northern eye wall moving onto Mississippi shore. Nate's northern eye wall, the most dangerous part of the storm, is moving onshore on the Mississippi coast, said the National Hurricane Center. Hurricane conditions are spreading on the coasts in Mississippi and Alabama, the National Hurricane Center said. Life-threatening storm surge is expected from the mouth of the Mississippi River to the Okaloosa/Walton County line in Florida. 9:36 p.m. New Orleans Mayor lifts curfew. New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu lifted the city's curfew after the National Weather Service lifted a hurricane warning for the city. Landrieu's office recommended that people continue to shelter in place. CBS News weather producer David Parkinson reported New Orleans will get the weaker end of the storm, but the city could still face wind gusts as high as 55 miles per hour, Parkinson said. 9:22 p.m. Storm surge could reach 11 feet in some areas. Hurricane Nate made its first landfall on the Louisiana coast and is expected to make landfall around midnight on the Mississippi coast, CBS News weather producer David Parkinson reports. Storm surge will be a real threat from Pensacola Beach through Dauphin Island and along the entire Mississippi Gulf Coast. Surge of 7 to 11 feet is expected from Waveland, Mississippi to the state's border with Alabama, and surge of 6 to 9 feet is expected in Mobile Bay. In terms of New Orleans, while it is possible power goes out, the city is on the weaker side of the storm, so even if they get 3 inches of rain, there shouldn't be widespread flooding. Major surge isn't expected there as they are protected by a levee. 4 to 7 feet of surge is possible on the north end of Lake Pontchartrain. The impact zone for this storm is Mississippi Gulf Coast, Alabama Gulf Coast and western Florida Panhandle Gulf Coast. Wind from the storm is expected to be 90 miles per hour, with some wind gusts up to 100 miles per hour. The primary threat from the storm is storm surge, Parkinson reports. 8:05 p.m. Nate makes landfall near the mouth of Mississippi River. Hurricane Nate made landfall near the mouth of the Mississippi River as a Category 1 storm with winds of 85 miles per hour, the National Hurricane Center said. As of 8 p.m., the storm is located about 100 miles south of Biloxi, Mississippi. The National Hurricane Center said Saturday night that Nate is expected to make a second landfall along the coast of Mississippi on Saturday night and then pass over parts of Mississippi, Alabama and Tennessee. 7:00 p.m. Delta announces flight cancellations. Delta has canceled for flights to 2 cities in Alabama and the Florida Panhandle ahead of Hurricane Nate, the company said in a statement Saturday. It said an additional 6 flights were canceled for Sunday. Delta said it extended its severe weather waiver to 12 cities along the Gulf Coast and inland in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama and Florida. The waiver allows customers to make one-time changes to their itinerary without incurring a fee. Customers are encouraged to check real-time flight status on delta.com or via the Fly Delta mobile app, it said. 6:32 p.m. Florida governor requests emergency order from Trump. Florida Governor Rick Scott on Saturday evening called on President Trump to declare a pre-landfall emergency for his state in response to Hurricane Nate. In a statement, Scott said the declaration would make federal resources readily available as Northwest Florida prepares and responds to Hurricane Nate. Scott urged Florida residents to prepare for the powerful storm and said its effects will be felt across the Florida Panhandle. "We must not let our guard down," he said. Scott said an early declaration would free up funding sources from the federal government for the emergency response. "We will continue to work with state, local and federal partners to ensure that every Floridian in the storm's path is prepared and we are able to quickly respond to Hurricane Nate," Scott said. 6:18 p.m. Nate heads to mouth of Mississippi. The National Hurricane Center in Miami says Hurricane Nate is about 50 miles south of the mouth of the Mississippi River at Louisiana's southeastern tip. The storm is moving north-northwest toward the Gulf Coast at an unusually fast 23 miles per hour. With maximum sustained winds of 90 miles per hour, Nate had not gained strength as of the center's latest advisory. But forecasters said it might still reach Category 2 strength of 96 miles per hour or more by the time it makes landfall. Nate was on a track that could take it over or near the mouth of the Mississippi by around 7 p.m. local time on its way to a later landfall on the Louisiana or Mississippi coast. 6:15 p.m. Evacuation orders across Louisiana. CBS affiliate WWL-TV compiled a list of evacuation orders across Louisiana. Some of the mandatory evacuation orders issued are low-lying areas in Hancock County and Orleans parishes, Phoenician Isles, Lake Catherine and Irish Bayou. Some voluntary orders in Jefferson Parish include Pleasure Bend, Brett area and Crown Point. For the full list of mandatory and voluntary evacuation orders visit WWL-TV here. 4:00 p.m. Alabama, Mississippi begin to see the storm's impact. Officials in Alabama and Mississippi say their states are starting to see impacts from the fast-approaching Hurricane Nate. On Alabama's Dauphin Island, Mayor Jeff Collier reports water had already begun washing over the road on the island's low-lying west end. The city of Gulf Shores, meanwhile, has issued an evacuation order for beachfront properties, and shelters have been opened along the state's coastal counties. In Mississippi, State Emergency Management Director Lee Smithson said 67 people were already in shelters into coastal counties while strong winds and high tides were driving Gulf of Mexico waters over roads near the Louisiana state line. And Governor Phil Bryant says the state's National Guard has mobilized 75 soldiers and the Highway Patrol has moved an additional 60 state troopers into South Mississippi. 3:50 p.m. Airports close in Florida. Alabama airports in some southern states are closing in anticipation of Hurricane Nate. The Pensacola International Airport in Florida and the Mobile Regional Airport in Alabama say they are closing Saturday before the storm makes landfall. The Florida airport said it will close by 6 p.m. local time, remain closed through Sunday and hopefully resume operations Monday morning. Officials at the Alabama airport said they hope to reopen Sunday around noon. Officials at the airports say passengers should contact their airlines for information about rebooking flights. In Mississippi, The Air Force Reserve's 403rd Wing relocated aircraft to Ellington Field, Texas, and Little Rock Air Force Base, Arkansas, as the storm approached the coast. "We are moving aircraft as a precautionary measure ahead of Tropical Storm Nate, and so we can continue the mission," Col. Jenny R. Johnson said in a statement. At this time, Keesler Air Force Base has not mandated the evacuation of base personnel. 3:45 p.m. Oil and gas producing platforms evacuated. More than 40% of manned oil and gas producing platforms in the Gulf of Mexico have been evacuated, according to an update from the Interior Department. The department said Saturday that workers were evacuated from 312 of the 737 manned platforms in the Gulf. Crews also have been taken off. 13 of 20 manned drilling rigs and other rigs have been moved out of the storm's path. About 1/5 of U.S. oil is produced in the Gulf. The platforms mostly avoided Hurricane Harvey in late August. 2:15 p.m. Governors tell residents to make final preparations. Governors in Louisiana and Florida are urging residents to make final preparations for Hurricane Nate's arrival. In Louisiana, Governor John Bel Edwards said Saturday that people in the southeastern part of the state should hunker down by 3 p.m. local time. He says the storm's eye is expected to make landfall about 4 hours later, likely bringing limited rain but powerful storm surges and strong winds. The State National Guard, meanwhile, has mobilized 1,300 troops and positioned high-water vehicles, boats and even school buses from Baton Rouge to New Orleans to help with rescues. Edwards said he also spoke with President Trump Saturday morning, who assured him the federal government was prepared to respond as well. In Florida, Governor Rick Scott said the roughly 100,000 residents in evacuation zones should heed warnings, stick to their emergency plan and stay vigilant for updates from local officials. He said the hurricane could bring not just storm surges and strong winds to the Panhandle, but also tornadoes. 2:00 p.m. Oil and gas platforms shut down. Some oil and gas platforms in the Gulf of Mexico are being shut down as Hurricane Nate churns toward the U.S. mainland. Federal officials said Friday that workers were evacuated from 66 oil and gas producing platforms in the Gulf, about 9% of the total of manned facilities. The Interior Department says crews also have been taken off. 5 drilling rigs and other rigs have been moved out of the storm's path. About 1/5 of U.S. oil is produced in the Gulf. The platforms mostly avoided Hurricane Harvey in late August. 1:10 p.m. Louisiana cuts early voting short for hurricane. Early voting is wrapping up sooner than scheduled in parts of Louisiana because of Hurricane Nate. Meg Casper Sundstrom, spokeswoman for the Secretary of State's office, said voters in some southeastern parishes will have until 3 p.m. on Saturday to cast their ballots early. The parishes affected are in the New Orleans area, including Orleans, St. Bernard, Plaquemines and St. Tammany parishes. Early voting will close as scheduled at 6 p.m. local time in the state's other parishes. Saturday is the last day of the week-long early voting period. Louisiana has a statewide election October 14th, and New Orleans has a hotly contested mayor's race on the ballot. 12:30 p.m. Alabama under tropical storm warning. The National Weather Service is placing much of Alabama under a tropical storm warning. Forecasters said Saturday that Hurricane Nate could bring wind gusts of up to 60 miles per hour across much of the central part of the state, which includes Birmingham, the state's largest city. The storm is expected to down trees and cause significant power outages. Isolated tornadoes were also possible Sunday afternoon. On Alabama's Gulf Coast, some communities have already imposed mandatory curfews from Saturday evening through Sunday morning. They've also ordered beaches and fishing piers closed and issued voluntary evacuation orders. On Florida's Panhandle, officials have ordered evacuations in some low-lying areas. They're also warning beachgoers to stay out of the Gulf of Mexico as the storm is already whipping up deadly rip currents and rough surf. 12:22 p.m. New Orleans prepares for Nate's storm surge. CBS News correspondent Michelle Miller is in New Orleans and reports that a mandatory curfew goes into effect at 7 p.m. local time Saturday. Mayor Mitch Landrieu issued mandatory evacuation orders for areas outside of the city's storm protection system. City officials closed off about 200 floodgates on Friday night, ahead of a storm surge that could be as high as 10 feet, Michelle reports. Water is already spilling onto streets in the city's Phoenician Isles neighborhood from an unusually high tide. Residents had until noon Saturday to leave. Can't call anybody, not coming, so it is a good idea to leave for most people, one resident told Miller. Others have already left their homes. The first evacuees began arriving at one shelter in Plaquemines Parish. About 20 were there by late Friday night with more expected to come. They take very good care of us opening these centers so we can have a place to go, and I appreciate that, East Bank resident Betty Duplessis told Miller. 11:06 a.m. Nate expected to make landfall as Category 2 storm. NHC says strengthening Hurricane Nate is now expected to be a Category 2 hurricane at landfall on the central Gulf Coast in coming hours. The National Hurricane Center in Miami says Nate's top sustained winds have recently risen to 90 miles per hour and the core is now about 180 miles south-southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi River. As of 11 a.m. Saturday, Nate was accelerating to 26 miles per hour and headed north-northwest on a course expected to take it onto the central Gulf Coast on Saturday night. Forecasters say the hurricane force winds extend out up to 35 miles, mainly to the east of the eye. In addition to hurricane warnings and tropical storm warnings already in place along the wide stretch of Gulf Coast, a new tropical storm warning has been issued in the Florida Panhandle from east of the Okaloosa-Walton County line to Indian Pass, Florida,